everything could be different. This is the most radical sentence I can come up with. There is no reason why we can't produce more of the things that we need and far fewer of the things that are destroying our world, our planet. No reason.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
The Treasurer knows. I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day, and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics, and policy in plain English. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett. Yanis Varoufakis' story is one of resistance. A former economics lecturer at the University of Sydney, Yanis became the Greek finance minister in the wake of the global financial crisis.
Most of you will know me as the failed finance minister of the most bankrupt state in Europe. Though I take solace that some people here in Canberra, including one or two government ministers, remember me as their Sydney University economics lecturer.
It was early 2015, and he was part of a left-wing coalition that promised to curtail austerity and renegotiate the country's debt after the crisis decimated Greece's economy. But Yanis resigned after just 5 months in the job, after his party acquiesced to punitive terms put forward by the IMF, the European Central Bank, and the European Commission. And since then, he's been a member of the Greek Parliament, became Secretary-General of the Democracy in Europe Movement 2025, and he's written several books on economics and politics, of course. He toured Australia in March as a guest of the Australia Institute after the cancellation of Adelaide Writers' Week. Today, we're bringing you highlights from that tour, featuring Yanis and some of the very special guests who joined us along the way. His latest book, Raise Your Soul, A Personal History of Resistance, tells the story of his political awakening. It's a captivating portrait told through the extraordinary lives of 5 women. In the book, Yanis argues that resisting misogyny is key to resisting all other forms of tyranny. But how do you resist when the misogynists are in the White House and when they're so determined to export their radical agenda? We begin in Adelaide with Yanis in conversation with historian and professor Claire Wright and the Australia Institute's Dr. Emma Shortis.
Misogyny needs to be resisted at every level. You cannot target misogyny at the level of the White House if you don't target it in here. And I speak as a man. It's patriarchy. Patriarchy, capitalism, and misogyny are the triangle that keep us down. And, when I was writing this book, I'm not saying this to advertise it, okay? It's just that, 2 years ago, for the first time in my life, I started feeling depressed. Up until then, I was very annoyingly joyous for my wife, for my daughter, And when I get depressed, I write. So I decided to start writing a story about women in my family because it made me feel happier. Okay, that's the only reason why I wrote it. And in that process, I started thinking about my upbringing. I was brought up by feminists. My mother was a feminist, second-wave feminist. My father's mother was a member, card-carrying member. I discovered that when I was researching the book. In 1923, of the Egyptian Feminist Union. 1923.
Did you literally have a card?
I don't have a card, but I've got her letters in which she talks about the card.
I'd like to see the card of the Egyptian Feminist Union.
I've got photographs to show you. Now, why am I saying that? Because my father was a feminist. My father introduced me to feminism. He would make sure that I would do the washing up and, that I wouldn't take it for granted. He would say things to me like, when I got involved in politics, okay, so you went to the Communist Party meeting, like, who made the coffee? I hope it wasn't the women. That's my dad telling. Now, why am I saying this to you? Because I was socialized through misogyny, because this is how boys are socialized. You know, the rites of passage when we are growing up is, you know, we wink at one another, the boys, in juxtaposition to the girls. We have little competitions of objectifying the girls. We don't even know we're doing that. The result is that our own soul is sullied. So we need, at every level, to understand that, especially women. Regarding Trump, and let's go back to the broader picture of the manosphere and all that. Look, now I'm going to be an economist. Why am I saying that? Because I started feeling that this was happening immediately after the GFC, the Great Financial Collapse or Crisis of 2008, because that was our generation's 1929. It was almost a carbon copy. If history can ever repeat itself, 2008 was a repetition of 1929. Wall Street banks go under. The banking crisis spreads to the rest of the Western world, to Europe. French and German banks go under. Governments start panicking and they bail out the bankers while at the same time imposing austerity on the many. That creates discontent. The left, predictably, we're the most idiotic tribe in the world. We fail to put forward a program that can, offer hope. And that discontent is harvested by the fascists, who immediately bring the big daddy image, immediately blame the women for having corroded the foundations of society. This is a backlash against liberal feminism, which deserves to be castigated, because, when you have people like Hillary Clinton representing feminism, I want to die. Then the only conversation you can have is, should there be gender equality amongst the torturers of the CIA? And then it's very easy for the Trumpists to attack woke, because if that's woke, who wants to defend it? So the struggle must be at each and every level, in your home, in your soul, in your trades union, in the town hall, in your place of work, in universities, everywhere.
In Sydney, Yanis was joined by Australia Institute co-CEO Leanne Minchell and Dr. Randa Abdul Fattah. Dr. Abdul Fattah is a sociologist and multi-award-winning author of 12 books. One of Australia's most prominent Palestine advocates, it was the cancellation of her attendance by the Adelaide Festival Board that brought about the mass withdrawals from both writers and sponsors, including the Australia Institute, before the entire Writers' Week essentially collapsed and was cancelled. We pick up the conversation with Randa, outlining why the erosion of Palestinian rights should matter to all Australians, before Yanis talks about the nature of Australia's relationship with America.
Palestine, like we said, it wasn't the exception, it was the preparation. It was priming the world for what was acceptable, what were the red lines. That's where international law died. That's where the political economy of genocide, as you so beautifully expressed at the Gaza Tribunal, Yanis, that's where the political economy of genocide was solidified, and we can see it now. We are all impacted by it. And, I hate to say it, but in a white supremacist society, there is no way that black and brown bodies can fight this alone. There has been no change in our demands, in our liberation movements, language, in our political analysis for decades. What's changed now is that the ideological hegemony of white supremacy and Zionism has been exposed, because people have seen, live streamed on their phones, the evidence of what we've been saying has been happening for decades. And now there's no denying that. And so it's on the majority to move past their comfort zones, to use their privilege, to really bring your solidarity in ways that count beyond just rhetoric, because we cannot fight this alone. And it is about community. But, in order to take this on, we have to realise now that it impacts every single one of us. If Palestinians don't get freedom of speech, nobody does. If Palestinians don't get the right to life, nobody's going to get it. And we are seeing that now in what is happening in Iran and around the region. Every single lie that Israel and the US used to justify bombing hospitals and refugee camps and school kids, they don't even bother lying about it now because they could see what was allowed. They saw the impunity that they were granted. And it's on us as a globe, as people, to fight against that, to push back against that. And we cannot do that alone.
Thanks. Yanis, I'd like to ask you for an observation as a dual citizen of Greece and Australia, that when we look at the way that people respond to oppression and injustice, I think it was a few weeks ago, there were some American fighter ships arrived in Greece and there were Greek people out with banners that said, "Go home, killers." And in Australia, so many people don't even know that we've got B-52s. What do you see for the reason between this seeming disparity between of how we respond?
It's got to do with our past, the different trajectories. I grew up in a fascist dictatorship that was instigated by the CIA, where, my father was abducted from our home on the 21st of April by thugs, secret police that came in. They had been trained by the CIA. We knew it. And also, a few years later, 1974, the way that our dictatorship collapsed was because the American Pentagon engineered a coup d'etat in Cyprus together with our fascist regime to be anti-Turkish and to give, therefore, the opportunity to the fascist Turkish government to enter Cyprus. So we have been trained well to know that when we see an American vessel in Piraeus, or we see the American embassy in the middle of Athens, we know they're plotting against us. They made no bones about that. So, whereas you, because of the Anglo-Saxon, the Anglo-Celtic connection, this country is maintaining, to some extent, the illusion of empire. That you're part of this empire, and to maintain white Australia policy, which is still alive, still kicking. They don't call it that. It's now against DII and so on. Yeah, it's about social cohesion. But there is this delusion that still survives, that the threat to Australia's social cohesion, nationhood, comes from the brown people who are rebelling against the empire. But this is not true. You are a colony. This country is a colony. And AUKUS has cemented that status in the long run.
Politics is not a level playing field. Too often, corporate interests use their outsized influence to hijack public policy debates and really corrupt our institutions of government. As Australia Institute co-CEO Richard Dennis puts it, this power imbalance is revealed by who can be wrong and who can get away with it. In Melbourne, Yanis and Richard were joined by former Adelaide Writers' Week director Louise Adler, and we pick up with Yanis describing the true nightmare of his time in government.
Look, when I was in government, it was a complete bloody nightmare. You know why? Not because I was facing the most powerful financiers on the planet, the International Monetary Fund, the European Central Bank, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, that cabal. That was a joy clashing with them. It was my job. My job was to clash with them. This is what my mandate was. No, the nightmare was my comrades. The backstabbing, the leaks, the way that they were pushing me like, David against the Goliath, but they had stolen my little catapult. No chance of winning, right? So that's why I'm saying that we are the losers of history. We are truly bad people when it comes to the way that we treat each other, but we're essential because without the left, there can be no hope.
Okay, so without the left, there can be no hope. But Richard, do you think that the left has found an adequate riposte to the right anywhere?
No. But, to take up Yanis's
Raise
point,
your soul, Richard, raise your soul.
Well, I was about to. it would be a lot worse without it. This sounds terrible. I'm looking at the audience here. At least half of you are going to know what I'm talking about. Go re-watch Monty Python's The Life of Brian.
I am with the Judean People's Front.
I am the People's Front of Judea.
Oh, I hate you more than I hate the Romans.
Splitter. And everyone under 40 is like, what the fuck is that? The crack suicide squad who show up to rescue Brian when he's on the cross. He finally thinks there's meetings, there's committees. Finally someone comes to help him and they kill themselves instead. But this is a 40-year-old parody of the left, and some of it still holds today. Look, I think that the right have so many advantages. The one is that if you're on the side of wealth and power, you can get away with shit. I often say, and thank you for the kind words about the Australia Institute before, but it's fun what we do, it's hard what we do, but to sort of boo-hoo for a minute, in Australia, power, in a democracy, power is the ability to talk shit and get away with it. So if Barnaby Joyce goes on television and makes shit up, no, see, you're laughing already, because that's what he does. We get a decimal place wrong and we get crushed. All right, there's nothing fair about the contest that the left engages with the right on. Look, I agree with Yanis. I think the left are the losers of history, but the losses, there are root causes that explain it. And those in power are always seeking to divide. Those in power are always using power to platform the one person they can get to agree with them on one thing. It is not a level playing field. But at the same time, the overwhelming majority of Australians aren't worried about a wealth tax on billionaires. Put up your hand if you're the billionaire that's worried about a billionaire's tax. The only thing stopping a democracy from having such a tax, the only thing is your fear that other people wouldn't go along with it, that it'd be silly to propose it, that it'd get slapped down by the handful of people who either would be harmed by it, but from the large coterie of people who would defend it. The left are the losers of history, but, we're up against power. It'll never be easy. But if you don't have the fight, it'll be a lot worse.
But Yanis, you resist words like equality and justice, don't you?
I'm a Marxist. Marx hated the word equality. He asked, equality of what? So if you're disabled, you have to have more income in order to lead the same kind of life as somebody who's not disabled. And in any case, it is never a good idea to go for airy-fairy concepts like justice. Marx's point was that there can be no justice when you have a system where the 0.01% own everything, and those who work do not own, and those who own work. To talk about justice there is like, talking about kindness in a slave-owning society. The point in a slave-owning society is to ban slavery. Similarly, the point today is to have, one employee, one share, one vote. That is the only way of socializing the enormous benefits from AI. Think about it, Louise. Let's say that, we were a company, right? And we were producing widgets, whatever. And there is an AI-powered robot that we could employ. It's very cheap to buy. And it reduces by half the labor, the human labor, which is necessary to produce our widgets. Now, if this company of ours is owned by a private equity fund, then they will get the robot and fire half of us. And then society will have to pick up the tab for the unemployment, the discontent, the alcoholism, the gambling, all that. But if this was a true cooperative, one member, one share, one vote, I'm not talking about nationalization. I'm talking about share ownership on the basis of library cards. Like you have a library card, you can't buy them, you can't have 10 library cards, you have one and that gives you one vote. Then we would get together, we say, let's employ that robot. we need to work half the time. Let's work for only 4 hours a day and spend the rest of the time looking after our elderly parents or kids, learn languages, write books, do nothing. So that's what matters to me. The only way of ending up with less inequality and more justice is by not caring so much about equality and justice and caring about the source of the exploitation.
In the deluge of awful news from home and abroad, it can be pretty hard to stay positive. But the future isn't baked in. What happens next will be determined by small decisions by regular people, not just those in high office. To finish, we return to Adelaide, where Yanis's speaking tour began. And we pick up with Professor Claire Wright talking about the possibilities for Australia in this moment before Yanis shares his most radical vision for a better future.
The way the most history is written written with hindsight, looking back, as if everything that has happened is inevitable. It's one of the reasons that I write, the way that I write my books is narrative non-fiction from inside, from the archive up and from inside the characters. If our characters don't know what's going to happen next, neither do we as the readers. Because I think that's how we all live our lives. I think that we don't know what's going to happen next when we walk outside today. Whether we turn right or left will make a difference to our day. But we can't write that knowing the difference that we're going to make. What I think all of the people I've written about, whether they're Yolngu people in northeast Arnhem Land or the Mary Lee and Catherine Helen Spence here in Adelaide, or the miners at Eureka, or the people I wrote about before that. What we can see is that the decisions that they sometimes made, the ones who made the most difference made with some form of moral clarity. When you have a sense of moral clarity and a moral purpose, that it doesn't matter which way you get buffered from hither and thither, you know you are walking forward. There are moments when our nation has done that. And the one that I would refer to is from my second book, You Daughters of Freedom, when Australia became the first country in the world to give women full political equality, the right to vote and the right to stand for Parliament. And then the women who had won those rights went out as the ambassadors and the spokespeople for the global gold standard of democracy and proselytised the Australian model to the world. And Australia was proud of that. Australia was proud that they had found the solution to what was considered an intractable problem at the time. It was called the woman problem. It's funny, we talk about, over the last 10 years, that Morrison had a woman problem, and the Liberal Party, as we can still see, still has a woman problem. Like it's not about the men who are making the decisions. The woman problem at the turn of the 19th century was about this pesky demand that women all over the world had, which was for the franchise. They wanted to be entitled to vote and had been peacefully demonstrating for decades. In Britain, it was 60 years. In Australia, much the same. Some countries in the world, it's extraordinary to know that women in France couldn't vote until 1945. Women in Switzerland not till 1975. I don't know, when could women in Greece vote, Yanis? Am I putting you on the spot? Sorry.
Not this side.
But for, all of those decades, it looked like they were not going to get there. It looked inevitable that men would always be the only ones who were able to vote. And now, from this point of view, it looks inevitable that change had to happen. But from in the centre of it, at the time, in the moment, in those decades of activism, that was not the case. So individually, I think Australia is at a place where, as individuals, we all can not squander our resistance. And as a nation, we can remember the times that we were brave enough, that we had enough courage of our own convictions as an independent country in the world to not follow Britain's lead, to not follow America's lead, to actually be the leaders of the world, not the policy laggers, so that other countries looked to us to see what had happened, what was going to happen in this great social experiment that was called female franchise. And it pains me that we now think of Gallipoli as being the birth of democracy. This is one of those papering over the past moments. Because it wasn't. It was the death of the nation we were becoming in the first decade of the 20th century, when Australia had an independent spirit and an autonomous view of its power in the world that all came crashing down again in the First World War. That is the hope that I hold on to. At a time where it seems like problems are intractable, wars will never end, new wars are going to start, misogyny, patriarchy, they're never going to go away. Well, some things don't, and some things change forever. And as Omar Al-Akkad said, one day we will all have been against this.
Yanis, the final word is yours. In our own historical inflection point, what are the possibilities for the world?
Everything could be different. This is the most radical sentence I can come up with, and I think it is the truest statement that one can utter. There is no reason why we can't produce more of the things that we need and far fewer of the things that are destroying our world, our planet. No reason. We have the capacity to do it. Doing all the things that we need to do is not consistent, however, with the maintenance of the power that capital has over the world. Let's be clear on this. This is not a question of just voting in another government, because the decisions that matter are not being taken by government. They're taken by big business, by big tech, by the big financial companies, and, our political system. The reason why in the end, you know this better than me. Take the teaching profession. When it was feminized, it lost its status. The reason why the political sphere was democratized was because power moved away from the political sphere to the industrial sphere, then to the financial sphere, now to big tech. So we need to take away those toys from the boys that own the toys that create power. Okay? And I get my hope, because there's no, as you read out, there's no empirical evidence that anything good is going to happen. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen. There's no evidence it will happen. It will not happen if we simply let it on automatic pilot. If we leave things as they are, we're all going to be destroyed. There's no doubt. Either by climate catastrophe or by war, we will be like a stupid virus that destroys its host. But we can turn this all around as long as we decide that things will be different, because we're going to make them different, right? And to do this, now let's go to the personal. I remember a scene, it's indelibly etched in my mind. It was 2011, it was June, it was in Greece. It was a huge demonstration against the parliamentarians who were about to enter parliament to vote in effectively the conversion of Greece into a colony of the financiers of the global financial sector. And there were these people preventing all the sold-out members of parliament from going in to vote in this total disgrace of a piece of legislation. And there was this young woman very slim, but very passionate. And she was stopping a very burly MP from getting in. And he turns around and says, "Who the hell do you think you are stopping me?" And she turns around very meekly but powerfully and says, "Who do I need to be?" So more difficult women.
And that's where we'll leave this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. The full sessions from Yanis's tour are available on the Australia Institute's YouTube channel, and we want to thank all the supporters that helped make sure that Yanis Varoufakis could still come to Australia even after Adelaide Writers' Week collapsed. If you want to support the Australia Institute's work, including this podcast, you can donate today. Monthly donors safeguard our independent research and support us to shape public policy in Australia. Every donation over $2 is tax deductible, and you can give now at australiainstitute.org.au/donate or via the link in the show notes. Our theme music is by Jonathan McPeak from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.